Here we go, Melissa.
Okay, well, hopefully everyone can see my PowerPoint now up on the screen. Um, that's what we'll be using to, oh, there we go. Now you should be able to see my PowerPoints. Like Sue said, my name is Melissa Anderson. I'm the Food Service Director at Holdingford Schools, which is just north of St. Cloud. We're in the central part of the state. I'm also the nutrition chair for the Minnesota School Nutrition Association, and through that work with the School Nutrition Association, I'm a member of the Farm to School State Leadership Team in Minnesota. It's a group very multidimensional. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield, we have Department of Ag, Department of Health, a wide variety of groups, and together we work to promote the farm to school activities in Minnesota, and particularly looking at providing support and resources to schools without duplication. If we've got one group who's developing great point of sale materials, then it would be silly for another group to do the same thing. So what we're working on is really avoiding duplication and making the best use of everyone's resources. So let's get started. What we're talking about today is that farmers are approved sources. When I first started hearing about farm to school, maybe about 5 years ago, the idea of buying something from a farmer just out my back door at school seemed kind of outlandish, but through a lot of work with sanitarians, with other food service directors, and a look at some food safety issues. Now we buy quite a bit. And as we get through the presentation a little bit, I'll share a few stories of things that we buy in our district and perhaps give you ideas. One of the people from our farm to school leadership team recently was in Vermont for the National Farm to Cafeteria Workshop, and she said a lot of groups there were talking about using R&D, and what R&D meant was rip off and duplicate. So any ideas that you hear today that would work for your school, either just like they are or with a little tweaking, feel free, because that's the great thing about schools is collaborating. At the end of this training session, uh, what we would like for you to feel comfortable with is to identify differences among vendor options, different ways to purchase, to understand the types of liability insurance, and to know what kind of questions that you would want to ask of your local farmers to determine if they might be a viable source of farm to school product. All right, with all the new Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, what we're seeing again and again is an emphasis on getting the kids to eat more produce, to eat more fruits and vegetables, and particularly fresh. Farm to school includes more than that, but those are those fresh fruits and vegetables are a great place to start with your farm to school program, and are easiest to buy. Uh, the thing that we look at with produce, though, is that produce safety is very, very important. Once we buy produce, we can't make it safer once it comes into our building. And so our main goal is to minimize food safety risks. And those food safety risks are present whether we buy our produce from our mainline distributor or if we buy it from the farmer who's next door. So the food safety thing is very, very important, and but it's also really important that we eat a lot of fresh produce. When we use fresh produce, that's the key, is that it is fresh. We don't have a kill step. Um, One farm to school item that a lot of schools like to use is corn on the cob, which would have the kill step because we're going to boil that corn on the cob. But fresh produce has to be safe as it gets to us to be nutritious, and then it's our job to keep it safe, to buy it safely and use it safely. HACCP-based food safety programs have been required in schools since 2004. If you do not have a HACCP plan or do not know where it is, or if you're not using it, that would be a great place to start, is to get your food safety program updated. NFSMI has a lot of resources on developing your HACCP plan if you don't have one. If it's been a couple of years since you've taken a good look at it or done any revisions, I'd suggest digging that out and making sure that you're including things like school gardens and farm to school in your HACCP plan. Then also, as a part of looking at your HACCP plan, you have it and you know where it is, but are you following it? And if not, you need to figure out if which one is out of sync. Is the food safety plan not meeting what you're currently doing, or should you be doing what's in that safety plan? USDA has a lot of resources on handling fresh produce. Since melons, tomatoes, and leafy greens are some of the most hazardous of fresh produce items, USDA has specific resources on those items. And this food safety website is a great place to find resources and tips on dealing with these items and fresh produce in general. One thing that I learned in the last couple of years that I didn't know before about using tomatoes was that you should always wash tomatoes in water that is 10 degrees warmer than the tomato. The reason for that being that tomatoes and by washing them with cold water, you'd cause shock in the tomato, and whatever bacteria are on the skin will get promptly sucked right inside. So if you've got a lot of experience with food safety, you might still find things that you didn't know by just doing a little reading and looking for new resources. One thing with farm to school is that in general, it is not cheaper nor less labor intensive than using other items. But if you have a chance to put kids in touch with what their food is, where does it come from, how does it grow in our neighborhood, that is where the real value to farm to school is. That being said, there are a lot of different sources where you can find local as well as non-local produce, those being a broadline distributor like a Food Service of America or an Appert's, a produce distributor like a Bix or a Bergens, a produce cooperative direct from a farm, a school garden, or a combination. If you're uncomfortable with bringing in product, the best place to start is generally going to be at the top of this list. A broadline distributor is probably going to have more policies and procedures in place that they can show you as you become more comfortable with purchasing. You can kind of move down the list until you're growing some of your produce at school in a school garden. A combination is probably what's going to work best for most schools. Distributors and produce distributors provide variety and year-round availability. If your menu is not very flexible, if you know that you have to have corn on Tuesday and you need tomatoes on Thursday, your produce distributor or your broadline distributor is probably going to be the best source, because they're going to be able to get you those products on the day that you need them. They require food safety practices of suppliers. That's not to say that you can't do that on your own, but that's part of the contracts with the broadline distributors. They have internal food safety programs, and they may or may not already purchase local produce. If your distributor is not telling you which produce items that you can purchase that are coming from a local area, if you ask them, they may be able to get you a list, or they may consider adding that to the distributor's online ordering program. In our district, we order from Appert's out of St. Cloud, and when an item is a Minnesota grown item, it will say local on our description where when we can pull up items. If I'm looking for what they have available this week that is local, I can put local into the search engine on the online ordering program, and they'll show me if they have cabbage or cucumbers or corn on the cob, whichever is available that week. I can see that, and then I can make choices accordingly. Some schools also use their distributor or their produce distributor to bring in certain items if there's a farm that you're interested in purchasing from, and they also sell to your broadline distributor. Sometimes you can make arrangements to have an item brought in and then lightly processed to a form that's more usable to you. If your school prefers to use diced tomatoes rather than whole, if you want potatoes peeled and cut into certain sizes, some distributors will take care of that for you. Produce cooperatives would be another step closer to the farm than buying from a broadline distributor. They can offer greater variety from multiple farms. Again, with your menus, if your menus are a little less flexible, they might have 6 cucumber farms that they purchase from, and the day that you need cucumbers, they can likely source cucumbers for you. It's reduced paperwork for you versus buying from the farm through streamlined ordering and receiving. If you had to purchase, say, those same cucumbers that are coming from, say, 6 different farms, if you had to coordinate how many pounds of cucumbers to purchase from 6 different farms and receive from 6 different farms, it would be extremely cumbersome. A produce cooperative can be like a central warehouse area where they can receive from multiple vendors and then make sure that you get what you need. They have a responsibility to food safety from all their sources. One problem is that commingling may occur. If you're purchasing, say, those same cucumbers from the 6 farms, you are not guaranteed that each particular box comes from a particular farm or that a certain box all comes from the same farm. And we're going to talk a little about commingling as we go along. But from my perspective, that would be the biggest downside of a produce cooperative is the idea of commingling, because different farms are probably going to have a little bit different level of food safety practice. And for myself, I would want to purchase from the farm that has the highest standards of food safety. And if I were the farmer and had those high standards, I wouldn't necessarily want my product stirred together with a farm that did not have the same high standards. These produce cooperatives are not real common in this part of the country. I've heard more about them more on the West Coast. Direct from farm is another way that you can receive product. You do with the seasons, depending on what the farm product is. Some are more seasonal than others. For instance, we buy honey from a local beekeeper, and we can get honey all through the year. However, corn on the cob is kind of a one-shot deal. So if you want to purchase directly from a farmer, you need to develop flexible menus with creative recipes. And advertised menus are subject to change. We put that on our menu all the time anyway, because mistakes are made in ordering, product is short from distributors. So not just with our farm to school products, but always we advertise that our menus are subject to change. But for instance, with our corn on the cob, we talked to our corn on the cob farmer is actually a student in our school, and prior to selling his corn to the school, he would have to sit by the road and sell it a dozen ears at a time. So he's really excited to sell 60 dozen at a time to school. But he and I talk in April, and we talk about wanting that corn sometime during the first couple weeks of September once school has started. excuse me, but we have to be a little flexible. If it's been a hot summer, I'm kind of expecting that corn to come in pretty quickly when school starts. If it had been a cool, wet summer, it might be a little later. So you want very flexible menus to help you use your farm to school products effectively. Uh, One thing another district in our area does is they advertise harvest vegetables. And several times a week during the fall of the year, they advertise harvest vegetables. It could be corn, it could be beets, it could be potatoes, squash, any variety of vegetables. But when you haven't promised the kids that we're going to have potatoes on Tuesday, then they might be delighted when they see squash, and they're not going to be disappointed because the item they were expecting is not there. One resource to help you buy directly from a farm is the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I did not get the web address for that on my PowerPoint, but if you look up Minnesota Department of Ag online, they have a wholesale database for direct from farms uh, sourcing. And if for you folks who are in eastern North Dakota, you may find a farmer who is close to the border on the Minnesota side who is willing and able to work with schools. Other things to consider when you buy directly from the farm is communication and negotiation on pricing and payment terms. Farms and schools do not necessarily do business in the same way. When farmers sell, like at a farmer's market, they're used to getting paid right now. If you schools generally have 30-day invoicing. Uh, you need a receipt, you need delivery slips, whatever your district needs to make sure that that your paper trail is good so that you can pay your farmer. You need to make sure that you're communicating that with your farmer. Uh, Other things to consider are the good agricultural practices gaps, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because that's our food safety, and also a farm visit. It's good both for the school personnel to visit the farm to see uh, if there's anything that gives you a little bit of a red flag food safety wise. Uh, Also, it's kind of fun to have the farmer visit your school. A lot of farmers are very engaged in educating kids about food, their connection to food, where does their food come from, and a lot of farmers are willing to come into schools and do little presentations. One resource that I haven't managed to take advantage of yet, but we have a yak farmer in our area, and he was asking if he could bring a yak to school. And the principal in that district is actually open to having the yak come to school, although we're trying to figure out how do we time the yak visit versus when we serve the yak hot dogs on the menu. We don't want to scare any children either. Some kids have a good connection, but other kids might wonder if they were having that same yak that visited them for lunch and be very upset by that. Uh, Liability insurance. This is another thing that you really want to talk to your business manager, your superintendent about if you're buying directly from farms. There are two different types of insurance that a farm would have. They may have food product liability insurance and general farm liability insurance. So when you talk to your farmer, if you ask them, do you have liability insurance? 99% of them are going to tell you yes. But what most of them have is general farm liability insurance that protects them if someone is on their farm property and becomes injured that type of thing. What you're really looking for when you're buying product is food product liability insurance. And again, that's really going to depend on your school district if they require the farm to have food product liability insurance or not. In the districts where I work, they have pretty much said no, that we're in a very small rural area, and they said we know these people and they are comfortable with the farmers not having that product liability insurance. I would think in a very large district that the district would likely say yes, that you would have to have farm liability insurance. Purchasing, uh, for a lot of what we're going to buy farm to school wise, the main thing is that purchasing be fair, that those who are wanting to sell to schools would have a fair opportunity to contact you, to visit with you about what they're going to sell to you, and the payment terms. But also, once you've done that homework, you want to write clear and detailed specifications. What do you want? How many pounds at a time are you going to need? And then to be consistent from supplier to supplier in asking for what you want. It's very helpful to the farms if you have an estimated amount of what you would like to purchase. If you're going to purchase something and it's going to be a one-time thing, that would make a difference than if you wanted the same item weekly for as long as the season holds out. All right, we're going to move more into food safety, because as we talked about earlier, food does not become safer once it enters the door of your facility. Things to consider when visiting a farm and asking lots of questions are what we're going to kind of address next, because here are some areas where produce can be contaminated: water, manure, and soil, insects, rodent, and other wildlife. Just as an aside, and I think you in North Dakota will appreciate this, I took a class in Washington, D.C. about produce safety, and one of the areas that they said they looked at was if the farmer was able to contain or able to control deer coming in and out of the farm area. And being from Minnesota, I think I gave them kind of a funny look, because unless in North Dakota you guys have much better control of your deer than we do in Minnesota, they seem to get over any fence, around anything. So, but the idea of our insects, rodent, and other wildlife, for sure, after something is harvested. But if it's in the field, I don't know how you could ever manage to control that. Equipment cross-contamination. Are we using the same shovel to shovel manure in the barn one day and then to dig potatoes the next day? Human handling. Do we have procedures for how to keep things, restrooms for workers, hand washing, that type of thing? Chemicals and pesticides are another produce contamination source. And then physical hazards: glass, wood, plastic, etc. And mainly we're looking at those physical hazards. Would be probably the most danger would be after harvest and during transport. All right, GAPS are good agricultural practices. However, what GAPS, it stands for a whole audit process that is done by USDA. It's very expensive to have that farm survey done, and the cost is done per agricultural product, not per farm. So if you have a local produce supplier that grows maybe 10 or 20 different products, they would have to pay for each individual product to be GAPS certified. And for that reason, there aren't a lot of GAPS certified farms throughout Minnesota for sure, and I'm not sure on the Dakotas. However, Minnesota Department of Ag is working on a cost share program for gaps, and I would guess that North Dakota is probably working on something similar. However, just because a farm is GAP certified does not guarantee food safety. And you can find many, many small farms that have just as good a food safety program as a farm that was GAP certified. All right, other options for small producers. A checklist such as the one that's going to look really small on your screen. This is the one from Iowa State University. Gives great questions for you to ask if you were to visit a farm. Some of the questions is your well protected from contamination? Are storage and packing facilities located away from growing areas? Is there risk of contamination with manure? And I did put, I'll make this PowerPoint available to Sue, the organizer, after the presentation today. And there's a website for this particular checklist. Cornell has another checklist. Then when I was searching, North Dakota has a nice checklist as well as Penn State. The main thing with some kind of a checklist is that it initiates conversation. If you start asking the farmer, have you ever had your well tested? He or she might go on to tell you a number of things that either make you feel much more comfortable with their farm or start to toss up some red flags. And if you come with a little checklist and say, I've got these items that I need to ask so that that we can keep the kids safe, the farmer is a farmer who's going to be a good partner for you to work with is going to feel very comfortable with you asking questions to keep kids safe. All right. Well, after you've purchased items, so you've made contact with your farmer, you've negotiated prices, you've talked about some food safety. When the product actually arrives, you need to take a look at it before it's unloaded and brought into your facility. You need to decide if the product is coming in the condition that you and the farmer originally agreed to. You want to take a look around the delivery vehicle. If the farm dog is riding in the back of the truck with your product, you may want to send that product back. If you've purchased something that is time temperature sensitive, you'd want to take and record temperatures before the product is brought in. And after that is when you start to safely store, handle, and serve the items. When we purchase farm to school products in our districts, we specify that we want the product unwashed. Buying the product unwashed gives one more chance that we get to do the first cleaning of the product, and that was how our sanitarian wanted us to work with the local farmers. It's very important to communicate with your sanitarian to be sure that they know what you're doing as far as sourcing product, and they can help you troubleshoot as well. Okay, other bid considerations. If you are a very large district and are purchasing a large amount of cut or processed items, you might want to specify climate controlled trucks, GAP certification like we talked about. You might want your vendor to have a HACCP plan. And if you're having that product cut and processed before it comes in, you may want to insist on a HACCP plan. Another key consideration is definition of local. For you, is local state of North Dakota? Is it 30 miles from your school, 60 miles from your school? For us, we say our school district or or an adjacent school district. So being a farm community, we keep our definition of local pretty tight. You would want to identify the number of days from harvest to delivery, um, so that your students get the freshest items and that are have good taste. And product traceability documentation. We mentioned traceability uh, a few slides back, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about traceability. Remember that traceability was potentially the biggest downside of a produce cooperative. It starts at the farm, then it goes to a processor or shipper who washes it, packs it, inspects it, and then it goes to a distributor or a produce distributor. But how it comes to the school is directly from a distributor. And we've got the school garden off to the side because those items are going to come directly into school from the garden. Now, if we want to start buying directly from a farm or directly from a produce distributor, we have taken our mainline distributor out of the equation for the most part. For the items that we want to purchase farm to school. See, we've got items that are coming from the farm directly to the school, or we might be buying them from co-ops or directly from a produce distributor. So when we talk about traceability, we want to know, where has that product been always one step back and one step forward. If we go back to our previous slide where we were buying directly from the distributor, notice that this distributor is the one who is responsible for the distributor to have traceability. When we go one step forward is to the school, one step back would be to the farm, to the shipper, to the produce distributor. When we start buying from the farm directly, one step back for us is directly to the farm, directly to the produce distributor, directly to the co-op. We want to know what happened to the product, where did we get it from, and where did it go. So for instance, we've talked about cucumbers a few times. Say that we had a farm who could supply us half the cucumbers we needed. We bought the other half from our distributor. When those cucumbers come into our school, we don't want to mix those cucumbers from the farm and the distributor together, because if we were to have an outbreak of foodborne illness and it was traced to the cucumbers, we want to know, where did those cucumbers come from? So traceability becomes more of our issue when we're buying from the farm, whereas when we were buying only from the distributor, we knew where those cucumbers came from, and it was up to our distributor and their invoicing tracking system to keep track of where did they get the cucumbers. All right, best practices for school food service on traceability is to keep purchasing records. Keep your invoices when you're buying from your distributors. Keep your receipts when you're buying from the farm. When you're receiving and storing, we talked about not mixing product together, and that goes for product always received from the distributor as well as from the farm. If you bought apples this week and you bought apples last week and you had a half a case of apples left from last week, you don't want to mix the new apples and the old apples, just in case. And we're always trying to keep food safe and to try to keep the kids safe and healthy, but just in case, we do want to know where those items came. Documenting service of fresh produce, and we do that through our production records. Tracking internal district and send cases of product to multiple schools. You want to know, where did that go? And you can conduct a mock recall too, if you wish, to see, okay, for the corn that we served last week, who did we serve it to? Where did we get it from? To make sure you can always go one step forward and one step back. school gardens. So once you have gained comfort with purchasing local product from your distributors, from your produce distributors, your co-ops, and your local farmers, the school garden may be the next source. And as far as maintaining food safety, this one, if you are the school food service director, you are going to get involved in the food safety in your school garden. They're becoming more and more popular. In fact, my school here just planted one last year, and I'm meeting with the ag teacher tomorrow morning to plan the harvest for our school garden and how we're going to get those products used in the school meals. It's a great district-sponsored learning environment. You would be amazed that even in agricultural communities, how many kids don't know that that was a cornfield they passed on the way to school, or that pumpkins grow on a vine. A garden is a great way to show kids how does food grow? Did they know that their French fries came from potatoes that were under the ground? Maybe, maybe not. A school garden is typically on school property, involves students, staff, and sometimes community. Often involves volunteers, and you don't have to just grow produce in your garden. Flowers and trees might also be part of the school garden. When you're working with the school garden, they are a source for you, just like your Food Service of America or APERTS. So you want to provide training, you want to monitor hand washing and personal hygiene, might involve, say, providing gloves for harvesting. You want to make sure that in the school garden they clean and sanitize harvest containers, which that is almost easier than it seems, because if they run them through your dishwasher, through your 3-compartment sink before you give them back, now they've been cleaned and sanitized. Also, to clean harvest tools. Things that are going to touch the items that the students are going to eat need to be cleaned and sanitized on a regular basis. And that's a great way for the kitchen and whoever is in charge of the school garden to start working together. You want to be a food safety advocate, and for the kids eating their own produce in the cafeteria, they are going to feel some ownership for the food safety in their school garden. USDA has a food safety tips for school garden. There's also lots available on the internet as far as school gardens. And remember that nutritious food must be safe food. If it makes the child sick, whatever nutrients they were getting from eating that food are obviously lost. And it's also a food safety education opportunity for students, staff, and community. I would be willing to bet that a lot of the teachers at your school don't know how to properly wash, say, melons before they eat them, or tomatoes. And the school garden can be a way for you to get into the classrooms to educate people about the importance of food safety, especially in their garden and when they're eating fresh raw foods. So when we use garden produce in school meals, you want to inspect it when it comes in, just like you would any other source of product. The garden also keep a log of who harvests produce, just in case there is an illness. And that illness may or may not be in your cafeteria, but if you have a child who's been helping harvest in the garden and they are diagnosed with salmonella or E. coli or jaundice with some hepatitis, you would want to find out what day they were harvesting it in the garden and then dispose of whatever produce that they may have come in contact with. You want to store your items properly, just like you would store any other produce items that you have come in, and maintain traceability. And that goes back to keeping a log of who's been working in the school garden. Fresh produce donations, and those of you who have been around school food service a long time have probably had a lot of opportunities where people have wanted to give you extra tomatoes, zucchini, squashes. Yes, you can accept donated produce. However, do so with caution. If apples, I will ask them, what kind of containers did you use to bring to harvest them? Is explain that we have very, very rigorous food safety regulations in school food service, and that we would ask those questions of any source of um, product. However, if in doubt and the person has already got their produce there with you, and once you've asked some questions, some red flags have come up, thank them kindly for the product, but then discard and don't give it to the students. Some ideas with farm to school. Apples are kind of considered the gateway to farm to school because they're easy to take in, easy to clean, easy to serve. Uh, we've had very good luck with cabbage, making coleslaw for the students. Carrots, and students are amazed at how much better the carrots taste coming from the ground than the little baby carrots that we buy from the distributor. Beets are a little more labor intensive, but they can be very good roasted. Melons, rhubarb, we've had very good luck with. Excuse me, actually, the students enjoy rhubarb sauce very much. Corn on the cob is kind of fun, and it is a great you'd be amazed how many have never done it. One of the districts in the Twin Cities brought corn on the cob in and had a classroom helping shuck the corn. And the food service director talked about that one of the kids tore into the corn, and when they opened the peelings and the silks away, they said, "Look, there's corn in here." We may think that that seems silly because we all know what corn on the cob is, but sadly, not everybody does. I'd mentioned that we use honey from our local honey, bison, turkey, even yak, and then grains like wild rice and flour are another great local product that you can bring in for farm to school. And you're only really you're only limited by your creativity. I've got some very creative staff in my school, and they thought one farm to school idea would be to serve things with plenty of sugar, because sugar was a locally produced item. We promptly discarded that idea. And then when we talked about the new regulations for the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act and the need to get rid of any item with trans fat, one of the items that we have not been able, that we are still looking to source in a good substitute, is the shortening that we use for some of our bread products. And the ladies thought maybe they could render some lard. We've also kind of tossed that idea out too, but you really are only limited by your creativity. All right, we are going to kind of slide through it, the next few slides, because a lot of these things are probably items that you already know. But as far as washing produce, we always say give your produce a shower, not a bath. So when you stop to think, okay, should I soak this in water or do I run water over it? You give it a shower. So you wash it under running water. If you've got product that comes in that's pre-washed and in bags, if it is in sealed bags, it can be used without further washing. And actually, if you do rewash items that say they are washed, you're opening yourself up to possible cross-contamination rather than just going with with how it was washed. Pre-washed produce in open bags should be washed before using because you may have contaminated that bag when it was originally opened. So those items should get a quick shower before being used. Avoid using soap or detergent to wash fruits and vegetables. If you're a school that still puts baked potatoes in the dishwasher, that was a common practice for a long time. Even with the soap, if with the soap pulled out of the dispenser, that is not recommended to put potatoes in the dishwasher. You want to scrub firm produce such as melons, cucumbers, or potatoes with a clean produce brush and wash produce even if you plan to peel the produce before eating. That includes bananas and oranges. And when you think about produce that you may, that you're going to peel it before you eat it, another thing you might do with it though is to cut it. And so if you take your knife to the outside of produce that is unwashed, and then you drag the knife through the produce, you have taken the dirt that was on the outside and drug it to the inside. So if you think of it that way, it makes a lot of sense to wash all produce, even if you're not going to eat the rind or the peel. We get lots of questions about commercial produce washes, and what the FDA says is that they do not provide significant benefits over running water and scrubbing with clean hands or brushes. So, so don't spend extra money on a product that's not really proven to do a lot for you. As we've talked about all through today's presentation, that the benefit of serving fresh produce outweighs the risk, but food safety is very important no matter where you source the product. Farm to School can be a fun way to connect kids to their food sources. It gives multiple opportunities to connect local farms and farmers both to your school and to your students. It will take some ongoing effort on your part to make and maintain connections with the growers and training for your staff and on how to use the farm fresh products. If your students even taste one new food this year because you promoted it as local, the farmer visited your school, or the student was able to help prepare it, that makes it worth it for students to be more connected to their food and to their farms where their food grows. Now, I think Sue is going to open it up to questions.
Took me a minute to figure out how to unmute myself. Does anybody have any other questions? We did have a question about the name of the St. Cloud distributor because we were thinking perhaps the schools on the eastern part of North Dakota could source some local food from Minnesota by going through that distributor as a first step.
That distributor is Apperts, Apperts.
And I'm sure they'd be easy to find if we Googled them.
Apperts.com.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Melissa? I see if you're looking at the chat box, Karen's thanking you, and I'd like to thank you also for your time today. And if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to remind you of the next webinar coming up, which is Doug Davis from Burlington, Vermont, will be speaking on nourishing communities on September 10th. And also the North Dakota Farm to School Week is September 16th through the 22nd. And at farms.org under Farm to School, we have lots and lots and lots of wonderful resources for you. And if I can show my screen, let's see if I can get out of this. That's what I was kind of showing you earlier. So I don't know if you can see my screen, but if you need help finding it, be sure and get a hold of me. And if there are no more questions, It is 2:53. We did really good with our time today. Melissa, thank you again. And thank you all who attended today. I really appreciate your support.
Well, thank you for having me. And if North Dakota folks have questions, don't be afraid to contact any of us in Minnesota. And and we will be doing the same as we all figure out all this new Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act and Farm to School together.